What is going on, guys? Welcome back. Commentary for you. Marcus Whitman put up a series of tweets today with what he essentially amounted to a faux apology from EA regarding the franchise mode and what would suffice him to hear from them given the state that they told us they would be creating a roadmap to fixing franchise mode. Now, what you're looking at here is from the old weapon system. And when going back and look at this, there's a little bit actually in terms of context that I forgot as to how much this made the game replay value, I guess, improve. When we talk about what's missing from franchise mode, at least to me, a lot of it is replayability. And I think a big part of that comes down to team building. And I just wanted to start this video by looking at what used to be in this game. You could essentially assign difficulty to a task that would earn you points that later allows you to select the weapon of choice for your player. So this gets you emotionally invested in the team. Do you want to have a team of hard-hitting running backs? Or do you want to have a team of evasive backs? And you can build a nucleus for your team to work around getting all these pieces that work into this puzzle. Unfortunately, where we are now, EA does all of the quote-unquote heavy lifting, if you will, and just assigns these based on players currently and what they do. And I think that's a big part of what's missing with Madden is I don't really care so much about how EA feels a player excels in the NFL today. I care about having the opportunity to build a team, draft players, bring in players, reclamation projects, if you will, and craft that player with my own user skill and how good I am with the game into getting them where I feel they need to be. And that's something really missing from the franchise experience. When we don't have that, you're left with a very shallow, closed-ended experience. It is what EA provides, and that's all there is to it. So I wanted to kind of go through some of the things he says here, because to be fair, I don't agree with everything here. We're not always going to agree, but he starts by saying, franchise players, thank you for your passion and feedback. We understand your frustrations. We are sorry that we made you feel unvalued. Over the last 3 weeks, we've been gathering feedback and organizing a plan of action for what can be done to improve franchise in Madden 21, but more importantly, how we can invest in the franchise team to work more efficiently, openly, and provide improvements to the game mode. Let me just say, for 2 paragraphs that someone put together on social media, in 3 weeks, for EA not even to just come out and acknowledge that, says a lot. Okay? We shouldn't be wordsmithing for EA at this point. Now, when I say me and Marcus have a bit of a disagreement, I think that comes with where we are now. Okay, so he carries with Madden 21. There's a short dev time, obviously, but they're going to work to add some superstar traits in that are editable, much like what we're seeing here. Formation substitutions in a custom playbook. And then go through fixing draft class and AI logic. Also going through scheme fits for defensive ends and outside linebackers, which we've covered other games are actually doing right now. I don't know in the larger picture if EA has the time to make any adjustment to Madden 21 now, given how far the game is along. And if nothing else, this is just going to serve as a stark reminder to everyone this year that they don't value the franchise community and they didn't put anything in a game mode meaningful for a long time until it got to a point where they absolutely just put in nothing. Now, he goes on to talk about designing systems, and this is where I think EA really needs to be in terms of full coaching trees. Unique skill sets that coaches have that can allow you to customize how your team plays and create some authenticity to each individual matchup that you face. And they tried to do this with their traits, but it just really fell short. To me, when you talk about coaches and going out and molding an offense or defense, you talk a lot about how a team plays and whether they can do this with the live playbooks or not, because those are just plays, not how a team plays. We don't have those aggressive defenders constantly. We don't have different formations routinely. We have essentially the same task each week, which is to beat a team using a very bland offensive and defensive structure that seldom does things to mirror their real-life counterpart. I think, to me, one of the things I took away from this is there needs to be an actual separation of face of the franchise and classic franchise inside the game if it's being projected outside the game. And that means as we go forward, when you look at what's done here, where does something like this lie? Where you're going through and you're selecting what player you want to actually train, and how are you going to train that player to mold them into the player you want them to be? That's where Face of the Franchise kind of clashes with Classic Franchise mode. Right? This, to me, is a critical piece of Classic Franchise in terms of team building. But EA has separated this out to almost be a unique game mode in Face of the Franchise. You have to give the overall team coach or owner in those modes the same freedom to create players, modify players, and build players as you would the actual player that you're putting in the first-person perspective of the game. Now, I say there's a clash here because if you know where Face of the Franchise is, it's limited to only a few positions. So when we talk about Classic Franchise, you can see that you also have the ability to go in and train different positions, like defensive line or offensive line, even though, for the sake of this video, this is actually showing you what you're drilling. So obviously, when you're looking at a halfback or a fullback, it's going to improve the offensive line that they're blocking for. Something I just talked about with EA kind of comes out in the wash nowadays. But I think one of the biggest takeaways I took is that one person on social media from our community sat down and penned an apology, a movement forward, a plan of action, and an acknowledgement in a time frame which EA has not done really anything but one small video. And I think if anything, we can sit here and talk about where this game has been, or where this game could go, or what this game should have. But the reality is, until they're willing to commit and establish something publicly, a plan of action, you are never going to regain the trust or the commitment of this whole entire community. And something else that's getting lost in this is, Franchise used to be one of the greatest game modes in Madden. So the fact that they took what was one of the most respected game modes, not just in Madden, but of all gaming, and diluted it down to where it's generally not only a shell of itself, but provides very little value upon purchase. And I also want to point out, to that same point, Shopmaster, a couple days ago, posted a poll and asked how many people purchase Madden just for franchise mode. And while that's a great poll to have now, I'd love to see the results of that poll 10 years ago. Because I think that shows a real distinction between what EA's customers wanted. We still want the same experience, but where EA has pushed its gamer to, which is, unfortunately, Madden Ultimate Team, microtransactions, and get in and out of a game mode. This goes right back to a few years ago when they were trying to make the games run faster. EA has been trying to get the gamer to spend less time in its product, accelerate its game time from start to finish, and it's done this by removing the coin toss, removing the halftime shows, removing a big part of the preview and post-show. And to me, I feel that's completely done trying to compress the time you're spending in-game. So if you have 10, 15, 20 minutes left over, you don't have enough for that full experience, well, they want you to go knock around a Madden Ultimate Team and fill that void, quench that football thirst, and hopefully buy a pack while you're there. That, to me, is the bigger part of this. It's not so much what they've taken away and what we don't have now, but it's why they've done it. And it's very hard to make a distinction that they did not do that simply for the sake of generating more profit from a game they were already selling. And it took a pretty meaningful period of time, but it actually did catch up to them. The fact that none of this is in the game, and it still plays a critical role, if not more than ever, in building teams in the real world says a lot. And just to go back and show you, as you go through and you earn your points, you're able to allocate them to help make this player the player that you want. Whether it's an elusive player like we talked about or a power back, you could really help kind of mold the player you draft or the free agent you pick up into the player you needed them to be. And this was critical for third down situations, goal line situations. Think about players like Marion Barber, Luke Lawton, Dan Colecco, just need some Colts just there. You know, you could make a skill player or a specific player solely for one purpose. And when you could do that, you wanted to play the game more and you wanted to have that experience continually. Imagine building a slot receiver, just a good slot receiver, a Wes Welker, Brandon Stokely, just a good slot player. That's all they do. Imagine building a player like Mike Furry from the defensive side over to a wide receiver, or vice versa. Pull one of your wide receivers back and run him as a defensive player. You know, there were so many options we had before, and now EA does them, but almost in a shell. Oh, here's Calvin Johnson as a linebacker on Madden Ultimate Team. Here's out-of-position players. They're willing to do it when you can buy MUT packs for it. But when it comes down to a meaningful game experience that doesn't have that same nickel and dime tendencies from the consumer, well, none of these things are possible. None of these things are done. And I think that's what's ultimately so disheartening about this. And the fact that, again, so much time has passed and they've literally done nothing that leads us to believe they're putting in a real tangible amount of effort with respect to the community. And for anyone that sits there and says the franchise mode doesn't matter, no one plays franchise, I don't care, guess what? Your game mode will ultimately be next. So you can sit there and pretend that everything's okay. But what you're looking at in the larger scheme of things is a company that overall does not care about you as a consumer unless you are feeding it more money. And there will be a point where you don't want to continue to feed the company money. And at that point, you will find yourself in the same situation we are in. Hoping that you can get social media traction loud enough to encourage a game to change for the better so they can earn your dollar as a consumer. So keep continuing to think that it's not going to be you, because 8 to 10 years ago, none of us thought we would be here today. We thought that Madden would continue to be a quality product, that the people that built this game would have enough pride and respect for their jobs, much less the people that paid for the game, where it would never get to a position where we literally looked at nothing changing from one year to the next. So, for the ones that think this is all just a big joke and no one plays our game mode, I'll talk to you in about 10 years when you're frustrated with gaming too. With that said, you know I appreciate you checking out these longer videos, which you guys really seem to enjoy. And I appreciate that because it takes a lot more time to talk for a longer time. And obviously, it takes longer to upload them with my internet that is powered by snails. Other than that, you know I will be back in the week with more commentary.